Have you ever let your mind wander and imagine an economy designed not for profit, not for endless growth, but purely for human well-being? What would that even look like? I mean, we hear so much about GDP, market forces, but what if everything was centered on, human flourishing, on universal needs?
It's a really transformative vision, isn't it? A system where the ultimate goal isn't just, well, wealth accumulation, but making sure everyone's fundamental needs are met. Fostering a society where well-being is the metric that truly matters. It sounds almost, well, idealistic, perhaps.
Absolutely. And in this deep dive, we're going to unpack insights from a truly fascinating source that dives right into this very concept. Our source looks at how this grand vision connects with the ideas of two prominent thinkers, Sam Harris and Marshall Rosenberg. But what makes this deep dive really compelling, I think, is that it doesn't just stay theoretical. It also examines a real-world, incredibly challenging historical experiment in Chile, where they actually really tried to build an economy like that.
Yeah, that's a crucial distinction. We'll first lay out the sort of philosophical groundwork, how these ideals might be structured. Then we'll shift to that bold experiment itself, Project Cybersyn in Chile. And, maybe most importantly, we'll explore the crucial lessons learned from why it ultimately, well, faltered. It's a journey from ambitious ideas to the often harsh realities of trying something truly revolutionary.
Okay, so let's start with that vision, because our source begins by highlighting Sam Harris's proposal in his book, The Moral Landscape. Harris suggests that morality can actually be understood scientifically, almost like a form of engineering, right? He sees it as the optimization of well-being. That's a pretty bold claim for something many consider, subjective.
It really is. And what's particularly striking about his framework is how he conceptualizes well-being. He envisions it as this complex, multidimensional moral landscape, complete with objective peaks and valleys. The peaks, for him, represent flourishing, and the valleys, suffering. This implies well-being isn't just a subjective feeling, it's an objective target. Something that can, in principle at least, be measured and maximized. He's trying to give a scientific grounding to something that often feels purely philosophical, or even spiritual.
So, if I'm getting this right, Harris is saying there's a measurable highest ground on this moral landscape we should all be aiming for, to ensure the most well-being for the most people. But how does he suggest we actually get there? It sounds incredibly ambitious and maybe a bit abstract. And how do you truly measure well-being objectively, universally, given how different we all are?
You've definitely hit on a key challenge there. While Harris posits that well-being is objectively measurable, the how of that measurement, especially across diverse populations, that's where the practical complexities really pile up. His framework provides the North Star, you could say, the direction society should aim for, but it doesn't offer a direct roadmap for, say, everyday interactions or large-scale social planning.
Okay.
And that's where our source then brings in Marshall Rosenberg, who offers a different yet sort of complementary approach through his nonviolent communication, or NVC.
Ah, NVC.
Right.
Many people might know NVC from personal relationships, maybe conflict resolution. But how does it fit into this big idea of a human need-based economy?
Well, Rosenberg's NVC is fundamentally a practical methodology. Its core is empathy and clear communication, specifically to identify and satisfy what he calls universal human needs. Think about needs like connection, autonomy, understanding, security. These are things he argues are fundamental across all cultures. NVC provides tangible tools for fostering harmony, both interpersonal and social, by prioritizing these needs and mutual understanding, moving beyond just blame or judgment.
So Harris gives us this grand scientific framework, almost like a theoretical map of where to go. And Rosenberg provides the practical communication tools to navigate the terrain, maybe on an individual or small group level. Is that a fair way to put it?
That's a very useful analogy, I think. While Rosenberg's approach is less mathematically formalized than Harris's, it offers actionable methods for people to understand and express their own needs, and crucially, to hear the needs of others. And that's absolutely critical for building the kind of social cohesion and collective understanding needed for any large-scale needs-based system. Without that shared understanding at the human level, even the most rational framework would likely struggle.
Yeah, it makes sense. It's clear that despite their very different approaches, one more theoretical, scientific, the other more practical, communicative, both Harris and Rosenberg share this deep conviction. They both seem to believe that human needs and well-being should be absolutely central to how we organize societies. and our economies. This is really where their ideas converge, isn't it? Highlighting this powerful philosophical current that really questions our current economic priorities.
Indeed. And if you connect this to the bigger picture, you have to consider how radical and frankly how appealing this idea is. Especially today, in a world so often driven solely by metrics like GDP and, quarterly profits. Imagine a world where every economic decision, resource allocation, production is made based on whether it genuinely enhances human well-being and fulfills universal needs rather than simply increasing monetary value. It really does shift the paradigm, doesn't it?
Yeah, it really does. So with that theoretical groundwork laid, the obvious next question is, has anyone ever actually tried to pull this off? And our source reveals this fascinating real-world attempt to do just that. In Chile, under Salvador Allende's presidency, from 1970 to 1973.
It was an incredibly ambitious and a really unique moment in history. Allende's government was democratically elected, remember? And they sought a democratic socialist path. So unlike traditional capitalist systems focused on profit or even rigid command economies, their guiding principles were explicitly social welfare and popular participation. The fundamental aim was to reshape the economy to serve the people's needs directly.
Wow.
Not just abstract market forces or state control alone.
And central to this grand vision was something called Project Cybersyn. This was the brainchild of a British cybernetician, Stafford Beer. It sounds like something pulled straight out of science fiction.
It really does, even now. Project Cybersyn was this early cybernetic management system designed to collect real-time data from factories across the country. Its purpose was to inform economic decisions. But not for profit, right? The goal was to dynamically balance supply, demand, and social needs, to optimize production and distribution to directly satisfy the population's essential needs. Imagine using computers and communication networks in the early 1970s, remember, to manage an entire nation's resources for human well-being. It was decades ahead of its time, seriously visionary stuff.
So essentially they were trying to use this, advanced technology for social good, to create a responsive economy that served human needs directly. Our source notes that while Cybersyn wasn't directly linked to Rosenberg's NVC, they weren't talking to each other.
No, not directly.
Its underlying philosophy aligned perfectly with this broader shift. Moving away from traditional market metrics towards human-centered criteria, it was truly visionary.
Exactly. It anticipated many of the concerns that Rosenberg's work would later address, just in interpersonal and organizational contexts. It was this almost utopian vision of a perfectly managed economy where data flowed freely and decisions were made to directly benefit the people. It was an audacious attempt to build that moral landscape, perhaps, and respond to universal human needs on a national scale, using technology.
But dreams, even visionary ones like that, often collide with harsh realities. And our source makes it painfully clear. Despite its innovative design, Chile's human needs economy was just abruptly halted. It led to its ultimate failure. It wasn't a slow decline, it was a sudden stop.
That's the tragic truth of the story, unfortunately, the primary reason: intense political turmoil. It all culminated in the devastating 1973 military coup that overthrew Allende's democratically elected government. And this act systematically dismantled all the reforms they had initiated, including Project Cybersyn, the internal opposition, the polarization within Chile. It was immense.
And it wasn't just internal pressure, was it? Our source points out the significant geopolitical forces at play.
Absolutely.
We're talking deep in the Cold War context here, which meant Chile's shift towards socialism was met with, interference, both covert and overt. The U.S., in particular, was, let's say, very concerned about the spread of communism or anything resembling it in Latin America.
Yeah, that created an incredibly hostile external environment for Allende's government. It really pushed it to the brink.
So you had internal conflict and external pressure.
Exactly. And beyond those huge political and geopolitical forces, there were also significant technological and logistical limitations to consider. While Cybersyn was undeniably visionary in its design, the reality is it was never fully operational.
Okay.
Partly because of these very real-world constraints. They were attempting something incredibly complex with technology that was, frankly, still in its infancy for that kind of massive scale. It was a grand experiment that never quite got off the ground technologically before everything else intervened.
And then there was the institutional resistance you mentioned earlier. Our source highlights that existing elites, powerful economic actors, they weren't just passively watching.
No. Not at all.
They actively resisted these structural changes because, it directly threatened their entrenched interests, their power, their influence.
They weren't going to just give up their positions without a fight. So when you put it all together, the intense internal political strife, the external geopolitical pressures, the inherent technological hurdles of the time, and that fierce resistance from established powers, it created what was essentially an insurmountable barrier. Even the best intentions, the most brilliant designs, they face immense friction when they come up against such powerful real-world forces.
Yeah.
It's a stark reminder that implementation is just as crucial as vision. And that implementation requires broad societal buy-in, which they just didn't have enough of.
So what does this all mean for, say, Harris's grand vision or Rosenberg's practical tools? Our source really drives home that Chile's experience underscores a fundamental truth. Technical or philosophical models alone are simply insufficient to reshape economies around human needs. You need more.
Absolutely. It highlights the critical importance of political will, for one, but also broad social cohesion and robust institutional stability. Without those foundational elements, the human element, the social fabric, even the most brilliant blueprint for a better society is, well, unlikely to materialize or endure. It suggests that a top-down technological solution like Cybersyn, however well-intentioned, probably can't succeed without significant bottom-up support and, maybe crucially, communication.
And for Sam Harris's vision, with his moral landscape and this idea of scientifically optimizing well-being, Chile serves as a profound, maybe even a tragic, cautionary tale.
It illustrates very clearly how messy social and political realities can effectively block even the most rational and empirically grounded ethical visions from being realized. You can have a perfect scientific model on paper for optimizing well-being, but if the political climate isn't right, if there's too much resistance, or if the mechanisms for achieving consensus and cooperation are absent, that vision remains just that, a vision, confined to theory.
Right, stuck on paper. And for Marshall Rosenberg's nonviolent communication, Chile seems to demonstrate the immense challenges of scaling empathy. Scaling effective communication. It's one thing to apply NVC in interpersonal contexts between two people or within a small group, but it's an entirely different beast to try and scale that up to entire nations, to complex economic systems.
It really is. That task requires not only the communication tools themselves, but also deeply supportive structures and a widespread cultural readiness for that kind of understanding, that kind of needs-based interaction. It's a huge leap from individual conversations to national policy. And the failure in Chile suggests that without the ability for widespread empathic engagement, the kind NBC strives for, a system designed for human needs will struggle against those entrenched interests.
So what here is massive, isn't it? What does this mean for any future attempts to build a truly human-centric society or economy? It's not just about drawing up a better spreadsheet or designing a more empathetic communication protocol. It seems to point to a much deeper challenge.
It really prompts us to consider the immense complexities of social change, doesn't it? It's about how to build the foundational political and social infrastructure that can actually support and sustain such a radical shift in economic priorities. It's a challenge that goes far beyond just good intentions or smart models. It's about navigating the messy reality of human power dynamics, collective action, and, frankly, fear of change.
So this deep dive has really shown us how the visions of Sam Harris and Marshall Rosenberg brilliantly highlight the absolute importance of centering human needs and well-being. In our ethical thinking, our economic thinking, they provide us with both a theoretical compass and some practical tools, or at least starting points.
And Chile's ambitious, but ultimately aborted experiment with a human need-based economy. It serves as both an inspiration and a really sobering warning. It showcases the immense promise of such models, the sheer potential to create a better world. But it also vividly reveals the complex interplay of technology, politics, and social factors that ultimately determine their fate. The failure wasn't just political and technological. You could argue it was a failure of the human system, the collective, to embrace and adapt to such a fundamental shift.
So building an economy truly aligned with human needs isn't just about crafting brilliant models or having noble intentions. It seems it demands resilience.
Definitely.
It demands broad societal consensus. And perhaps most crucially, it requires profound political courage to actually enact such monumental change. Which leaves us with a final thought, maybe for you, the listener. What would it take for us today to cultivate that kind of resilience, that kind of consensus, that courage?